Hello, my name is Reiko Osoroshi. On this channel, I narrate Japanese ghost stories. Today's ghost story is about the secret of a friend's family home. The secret of a friend's family home. During my college days, a friend from my club and I went on a late-night drive together. On a whim, we decided to go to a ramen shop in the neighboring city, and on our way back, we took a winding mountain road that snaked like a snake. I had been on this road a few times during the day, but at night, it had an eerie atmosphere that made it seem like an entirely different place. I was the one behind the wheel, but I'm quite easily spooked, so I felt relieved when my friend offered to take over driving. However, my friend Yamane had indulged in an extra bowl of ramen at the shop and was sitting in the passenger seat, making irresponsible remarks instead of being helpful. You know, there are all sorts of strange stories about this mountain pass, Yamane suddenly whispered, lowering his voice. I hadn't heard of any such stories, but I thought if I asked, what stories? Tell me more, it would play right into his hands. So, I pretended not to be interested and replied with a nonchalant, oh. For some reason, Yamane looked down and remained silent for a while. It was a two-lane road, but not a single oncoming car passed by. The dimly lit streetlights were scattered sparingly along the way. We continued driving in silence, and suddenly, I felt like I saw a large figure up ahead, which startled me for a moment. However, I realized it was a roadside Jizo statue and breathed a sigh of relief. I remembered that there were strangely large Jizo statues in this area. At that moment, Yamane, who had been silent, spoke up, hey, want to hear a scary story? I had thought he was a quiet guy, but it turned out he had been thinking about ghost stories. I didn't want to come across as scared, so I replied, sure, go ahead. Yamane began to speak, still looking down. My family's backyard, you see, is said to have a buried dwarf, according to my grandfather. Our house is pretty old, you know. There's this strange rock in the corner of the yard that's been there for who knows how long, and the dwarf is said to be buried beneath it. So, as my grandfather puts it, this dwarf has been protecting our house for generations. In return, it's always in a bad mood, so we have to water it every single day and keep the area around the rock clean. Certainly, both my grandfather and grandmother used to pray to that rock every day, but I used to wonder if such stories were real. When I was in elementary school, I asked my bedridden great-grandfather about it when I visited him in the hospital. He confirmed it too, saying he had heard it from my own grandfather. It was so long ago that it seemed like ancient history to a child, so I simply believed it without any doubt. Yamane continued his story in a monotone manner. It was quite an unusual tale for a ghost story in this setting. He said, dwarves, you know, are usually associated with house spirits like Zashiki Warashi or protective household deities. But the fact that it's buried is strange, right? So, I asked my great-grandfather why it's buried. Just as I listened to this, I suddenly saw a figure ahead and instinctively tried to turn the steering wheel in the opposite direction. The headlights only briefly illuminated it, but it didn't seem to be a person. It was a Jizo statue. When I realized that, a shiver ran down my spine. Hadn't we already passed by here? It didn't make sense, the road was straight. Great-grandfather joined his hands together while lying in bed, closed his eyes, and whispered. He told me that long ago, the head of our family had welcomed a child that brought good fortune into the house, and the house prospered greatly. However, no matter how they entertained the child with alcohol and women, the child said he needed to leave. So, the head of the family, in desperation, cut off the child's limbs with a sword and buried them separately somewhere in the house. My head was spinning. I couldn't recognize the road. The scenery with trees on both sides remained unchanged, but it felt odd that we hadn't passed the mountain pass yet. What was that Jizo statue earlier? I don't remember there being two of them. The lanes were winding, as if avoiding the headlights. Yamane continued to speak, occasionally pausing as if lost in thought, still looking down. Since then, my family has continued to prosper as a business, but many family members have died earlier from epidemics. According to my great-grandfather, the child not only brought fortune but also was a vengeful deity that haunted our family. That's why the stone must be treated with great care to appease its anger. As he spoke, the road seemed to twist and turn, and the unsettling feeling grew. Stop it. Hey, cut it out. I meant to say, we'll get stuck, but it felt like we were going in circles on the same road, and Yamane's story didn't seem to fit. I suddenly wondered what he meant by various strange stories about this mountain pass that he mentioned earlier. Yamane tried to continue, saying, this is a secret story that's supposed to stay within our family. Hey, Yamane, I couldn't hold back any longer and raised my voice. Yamane didn't look up. He seemed like he was just fooling around, but upon closer inspection, his shoulders were trembling slightly. There's something weird about this story, and I wanted to find out, Yamane said. That's why my great-grandfather taught me one charm. Yamane, what's going on? Why are you telling me this? So, Yamane, something's weird outside the car, don't you realize? I was becoming desperate. So, Say this when something like this happens, Yamane began to instruct, his voice shaking. Hoi, where are you? Where are your feet? Hoi. My heart felt like it had been plunged into icy water. I was covered in goosebumps, and it was an electrifying sensation. The echoing words, Hoi, reverberated in my head. Hoi. I muttered while gripping the steering wheel with an empty mind. It felt like some unseen fog was lifting from my head. Please, Yamane said, then clasped his hands together and fell silent. And before we knew it, we were back on a familiar, wide road. We entered the city and stopped at a family restaurant, and during the entire journey, we remained silent. Yamane mentioned that around the area of that mountain pass, he saw a face peering out from under the gap beneath the passenger side door. It was around the time when his joking remarks suddenly stopped. The pale face slowly crawled out flatly, grinning creepily, and he felt that something was very wrong. He explained that he wasn't telling me the story as much as he was sharing it with the face at his feet. It was an incantation used by his family when they were in crisis. When you get home, be sure to thank the dwarf, I jokingly said. But it's surprising that you believed in such things, I added honestly. Yamane had a solemn expression as he replied, I dug it up. How was it? What was buried at his friend's family home, and is his friend okay after that? Do you have any stories that have been passed down through generations in your family? If so, please share them in the comments section. If you have any other stories you would like me to introduce or any questions about the stories, please leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next episode.